People always said Kieran and I look nothing alike. He got dad's broad shoulders and mom's easy smile, the kind that made teachers give him extensions. And cops let him off with warnings. I got the leftover genes and all the leftover responsibilities. From the time I could reach the washing machine, I was doing his laundry, Riven so responsible. Mom would coo, like it was some natural talent instead of necessity. While Kieran partied through high school with a 2.1 GPA, I worked doubles at the diner after school, came home to a sink full of his dishes, and still pulled straight A's. "You're the smart one," Dad would say, ruffling my hair like it was consolation for watching them pay for Kieran's third car, after he wrapped the second one around a tree. "You don't need help like your brother does. Help, that's what they called it when they paid his rent, his legal fees, his credit card bills. What I got was called building character. I didn't mind, not really. I had a plan. Princeton had been my dream since I was 12, and saw their engineering program featured in a magazine. At the dentist's office, every shift at the diner, every all-nighter studying. Every time I said no to friends because I couldn't afford to go out, it was all for that acceptance. Letter. The scholarship was full ride. Academic merit, need-based, everything. I'd calculated it down to the cent. Room, board, books, even a small allowance for food. For the first time in my life, I'd be free to just learn. To be around people who cared about ideas instead of which party had the best keg. I was working a dinner shift when the letter came. Mrs. Chen from next door texted me a photo, thick envelope, Princeton letterhead, my name and fancy script. I dropped a full tray of plates and didn't even care about the mess. Full scholarship. I whispered to myself in the walk-in freezer, crying happy tears between the frozen fries and burger patties. Full fucking scholarship. I didn't tell anyone. That night, I wanted to savor it. To hold this one perfect thing close before the family circus turned it into background noise. But when I got home at midnight, Kieran was passed out on the couch. Empty beer cans scattered around like confetti. Mom was in her room with the door closed, another headache that came in a bottle. I put the letter in my desk drawer under my other college materials. Safe, secret, mine. The next morning, I woke up to Mom crying at the kitchen table. Kieran sat across from her, somehow managing to look both ashamed and defiant. "What now?" I asked. Though I already knew, there was always something. "Your brother lost his job," Mom said, dabbing her eyes, "and he's behind on rent, and there's this misunderstanding with his credit cards." Misunderstanding? I poured myself coffee, trying to stay calm. "What kind of misunderstanding?" Kieran shrugged. "Shit happens, little brother. Life's complicated when you're not hiding in books all day." The irony wasn't lost on me. I was 17, about to graduate valedictorian, and he was 23. Living like a teenager with a trust fund we didn't have. "We need to help him," Mom said, looking directly at me. "Family helps family. I'm not family when it comes to my college fund," I said quietly. She flinched. "That's different. That's just sitting there. Kieran needs help now. I need that money for Princeton." "Princeton?" Kieran laughed. Actually laughed. "Jesus, Riven. You're 17. You think you're gonna waltz into some fancy school and suddenly be better than us. I think I'm going to get an education." "Education doesn't pay bills," Mom said. "Your brother has real responsibilities." Real responsibilities, like the ones I'd been handling since I was 12, apparently. But I held firm. For once in my life, I said no. I went to school, came home, did my homework. I didn't check on Kieran's job search or help him write his resume. I didn't offer to lend him money from my savings account. And they let me. For 2 whole weeks, they let me believe I'd finally drawn a line they'd respect. I should have known better. The morning I planned to submit my enrollment confirmation, I woke up to find my desk drawer jimmied open. Everything was scattered: transcripts, financial aid forms, recommendation letters, but the Princeton acceptance letter was gone. I tore my room apart looking for it, then searched the whole house. Mom was at work, but Kieran was lounging in the living room, watching TV like he didn't have a care in the world. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Have you seen my Princeton letter?" He didn't even look away from the screen. What, my acceptance letter? It was in my desk." "Oh, that." He shrugged. "Yeah, about that." My stomach dropped. "About what?" "Look, little brother, I've been thinking. This whole college thing, it's kind of selfish, don't you think?" "Selfish? I mean, Mom's getting older. She can't handle everything on her own. And I'm going through a rough patch right now, you know. I need someone in my corner." I stared at him. "Where's my letter?" "Kieran." He finally looked at me. And I saw something I'd never seen before: genuine malice, not the casual cruelty of a sibling, but something deeper, something that had been growing in the dark corners of his resentment. "You know what your problem is," he said, standing up. "You think you're special. You think because you got good grades and work some dead-end job, you're better than the rest of us. I just want to go to college and leave me to clean up my own messes." He laughed, but it was ugly. "I don't think so. That's not my responsibility." "Everything's your responsibility, Riven. That's what makes you useful." The word hit me like a slap. Useful, not loved, not valued, not appreciated. Useful. Where is my letter? Kieran walked to the fireplace, the one that hadn't been used in years, and pointed to the cold ashes at the bottom. "Right there." I couldn't breathe. "You didn't." "I did." He pulled out his phone and showed me a video. My acceptance letter, burning, the Princeton seal curling and blackening, my name disappearing into smoke. "If you leave, I've got no one to clean up my messes. And honestly, I'm not ready to be that responsible." I launched myself at him. I'd never hit anyone in my life, but 17 years of being the good kid, the reliable one, the one who never complained, it all exploded at once. We crashed into the coffee table, sending his beer bottles flying. He was bigger than me, stronger. But I had rage on my side. I got in a few good hits before he pinned me down, laughing. "There's my little brother," he said, blood trickling from his split lip. "I was wondering when you'd finally grow some balls." "I hate you," I gasped. "No, you don't. You need me. We all need each other. That's what family is." But he was wrong. I didn't need this. I didn't need to be their emotional janitor, their safety net, their backup plan. I could call Princeton, explain what happened, maybe get a replacement letter. But even as I thought it, I knew it was too late. The enrollment deadline had passed. My spot was gone. "Mom's gonna be home soon," Kieran said, getting off me. "You gonna tell her how you attacked me, how you can't control your temper?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw my future if I stayed. 20s, 30s, 40s spent managing his disasters, subsidizing his failures, watching him take credit for my work while I got smaller and smaller. "No," I said quietly, "smart. Now, I'm thinking we can look into community college for you. Stay local, help out around here, maybe get a better job, something with benefits Mom can use." He'd mapped out my entire life in the space of a morning: 2 years of community college, then a local state school if I was lucky, a job close to home so I could keep paying his bills and cleaning up his messes, marriage to some local girl who'd understand that Kieran came first. Kids who'd grow up watching Uncle Kieran take advantage of their father the same way he'd taken advantage of everyone else. "What do you think?" he asked. I thought about the diner, about Mrs. Patterson, who'd worked there for 30 years and still lived in the same cramped apartment. I thought about my high school counselor, who'd been so proud when I got into Princeton. I thought about the future I'd planned, the life I'd worked for, the dreams that were now literally ashes in a cold fireplace. "I think," I said carefully, "that you're right. Family should stick together." Kieran smiled. "That's my boy now. Why don't you clean up this mess? I've got a job interview this afternoon." Of course he did. Of course he'd finally found motivation to work right after destroying my future. I watched him walk away, whistling, and something inside me went quiet, not peaceful, empty, like a house after all the furniture's been removed. I cleaned up the broken glass and the spilled beer. I swept up the ashes from the fireplace, the last remains of my acceptance letter. Then I went to my room and sat on my bed, staring at the wall. That night, I made a decision. I waited until 2 a.m. Mom was asleep, and Kieran was passed out on the couch after celebrating his job interview with a six-pack. I'd heard him on the phone earlier, bragging to his friends about how he'd straighten out his little brother's priorities. My savings account had $3,847, every dollar from the diner, every birthday check from grandparents, every penny I'd scraped together for Princeton. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I'd been planning to use it for textbooks and emergencies. Now, it was my escape fund. I packed light, 2 changes of clothes, my laptop, chargers, and the folder with copies of my transcripts. Everything else could stay. This place had never really been home anyway, just a way station where I'd been trapped by obligation and guilt. I left a note on the kitchen table. "Mom, I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore. I need to build my own life. I'll be okay. Don't worry about me. Love, Ribbon short and sweet. No accusations, no drama, just the truth." I should have known they wouldn't let me go quietly. My phone started ringing at 6 a.m. I was already 3 states away, riding a Greyhound bus toward Chicago. But I answered anyway. Riven, thank God. Where are you? Kieran said you had some kind of breakdown. I'm fine, Mom. You're not fine. You left. You just left. What am I supposed to tell people? Tell them I grew up. Don't be smart with me. This is about the college thing, isn't it? Honey, you can still go to school. Community college is a perfectly good option. After Kieran burned my Princeton letter, silence. Then, he said you were upset about something silly. He didn't tell me about any letter. Of course he didn't. Ask him about it. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. Mom, he destroyed my acceptance letter because he wanted to keep me around to fix his problems. And you would have let him. That's not. We're family. Riven, we help each other. No. I help everyone. Everyone else just takes. She started crying. Please come home. We'll figure this out. I am home, or I will be, once I find where that is. I hung up and turned off my phone. The next few weeks were hell. I found a room in a Chicago boarding house that smelled like cigarettes and despair. The other residents were a mix of drifters, addicts, and people like me running from something they couldn't name. I got a job washing dishes at a 24-hour diner, pulling double shifts to cover rent and food. But for the first time in my life, my problems were my own. When I came home exhausted, there weren't any dishes in the sink that I hadn't dirtied. When I got my paycheck, nobody was waiting with their hand out. When I made a mistake, I was the only one who suffered the consequences. It was terrifying and liberating at the same time. I enrolled in community college part-time, taking business and accounting classes, not engineering. I couldn't afford the labs and equipment, but I was learning, and that was enough for now. My professors didn't know about my family drama or my Princeton dreams. To them, I was just another student working his way through school. After 6 months, I made the mistake of checking my social media. The lies Kieran had been spreading were worse than I'd imagined. According to him, I'd had a mental breakdown and run away because I couldn't handle the pressure of family responsibilities. He'd spun himself as the concerned older brother, worried sick about his unstable sibling. The narrative was perfect. I was the ungrateful kid who'd abandoned his family in their time of need. He was the victim, left to care for our aging mother while dealing with his own struggles. People who'd known me my whole life were buying it. Always thought Riven was a little weird. Someone had commented, too smart for his own good. Kieran's such a good guy for not giving up on him, said another. I hope Riven gets the help he needs. I closed the laptop and didn't touch social media again for 3 years, but the damage was done. Even knowing it was all lies, even knowing I'd made the right choice, part of me started to believe I was the problem. Maybe I was selfish. Maybe I should have stayed. Maybe family really did mean sacrificing your dreams for other people's comfort. Those thoughts almost broke me. There were nights I sat in my tiny room, staring at bus schedules, calculating how long it would take to get home, how easy it would be to just give up, go back to being useful. I didn't, though. Something stubborn in me refused to let Kieran win. Every time I wanted to quit, I thought about that video of my acceptance letter burning, and the rage carried me through another day. I was going to prove them all wrong. I was going to show them that the weird, ungrateful kid they'd written off was capable of more than they'd ever imagined. I just had to figure out how. The answer came from an unexpected source, Marcus Volkov, a regular at the diner who always ordered black coffee and pie at 3 a.m. He was in his 50s, wore expensive suits despite the late hour, and never looked up from his laptop while he ate. One night, his laptop crashed right in the middle of what looked like an important presentation. He started swearing in 3 languages, and I couldn't help myself. Mind if I take a look? I asked, refilling his coffee. He looked up at me like I just offered to perform brain surgery. You know computers, a little. I'd been fixing the diner's ancient POS system for months, learning as I went. Worst case, I make it more broken. He laughed despite himself. Fine. But if you screw this up, I'm telling your manager you poisoned my pie. It was a corrupted file. Nothing major. I managed to recover most of his presentation and walked him through setting up automatic backups. He stared at me like I just parted the Red Sea. How old are you? Kid, 18. And you're washing dishes. It pays the bills. What do you want to do? Really want to do? I'd stopped talking about my dreams. But something about Marcus made me honest. I wanted to study engineering. Ended up here instead. Engineering. He nodded thoughtfully. You know, I run a small tech consulting firm. Nothing fancy, but we help businesses optimize their operations. I could use someone who understands both technology and service industry problems. I don't have any experience. I don't need experience. I need someone who's hungry and smart enough to learn. He handed me a business card. Think about it. I stared at the card. Volkov Solutions, making business better. What's the catch? No catch. But I pay minimum wage. The hours are long, and I'm a bastard when I'm stressed. Still interested? I quit the diner that night. Working for Marcus was like getting a master's degree in business while being paid. He threw me into everything: client meetings, system analysis, process improvement, financial modeling. I made mistakes, lots of them, but he treated each one as a learning opportunity instead of a reason to write me off. You think differently than most people. He told me after I'd solved a particularly complex inventory problem for one of his clients. You see the whole system, not just the parts. Is that good? It's rare. Most people get stuck in their own department, their own role. You understand how everything connects. Within a year, I was leading projects. Within 2, I was bringing in my own clients. Marcus started talking about partnership, about building something bigger together, but the real breakthrough came when I was 22. We were consulting for a mid-sized manufacturing company that was hemorrhaging money. The CEO was convinced they needed new equipment, but the numbers told a different story. It's not your machines, I told him in a presentation that took me 3 weeks to prepare. It's your logistics. You're spending more on shipping and storage than you're making in profit. I showed him a complete reorganization plan: new supply chain relationships, optimized inventory management, strategic warehouse placement. It would save them millions and didn't require a single new machine. He implemented every recommendation. 6 months later, the company was profitable again, and they weren't the only ones paying attention. Word spread. Other companies started calling, asking for that kid who fixed Morrison Manufacturing. Marcus and I rebranded as Volkov Ridge Solutions, with me as equal partner. We grew from 2 people to 20, then 50. I was 25 when Marcus decided to retire. Company's yours if you want it, he said. I'm getting too old for 18-hour days. I can't afford to buy you out. Who said anything about buying? Consider it a graduation gift. I renamed it Ridge Solutions and kept growing. We specialized in turning around struggling companies, finding the inefficiencies that were bleeding them dry. My reputation grew, the guy who could walk into a failing business and make it profitable again. By the time I was 28, I had offices in 3 cities and a client list that included some of the biggest names in manufacturing. I'd bought a house in the suburbs, drove a car that cost more than my parents' mortgage, and had a savings account that would have made my 18-year-old self dizzy, but I wasn't happy. Success felt hollow when there was no one to share it with. I'd built an empire, but I'd built it alone. Dating was difficult when you couldn't explain why you hadn't spoken to your family in 7 years. Friends were hard to make when you'd learn not to trust anyone with your vulnerabilities. Then, one morning, I got a call that changed everything. Mr. Ridge, this is Jennifer Walsh from Caldwell Industries. I understand you specialize in corporate restructuring. I knew Caldwell Industries, mid-sized manufacturing company, been around for decades. What's the situation? We're in trouble. Bad management, overspending, union issues. We need someone who can come in and, well, clean house. I'd be happy to discuss it. Can you send me your financials? Of course, but I should mention we're looking at significant layoffs, possibly entire departments. I almost said no. I'd built my reputation on saving companies, not destroying lives. But something made me ask, what kind of manufacturing? Auto parts, mostly. We supply components to the major manufacturers. My blood went cold. I knew that company. Everyone in my hometown knew that company. It was the biggest employer in the area, the place where half the town worked, including my brother. I'll take the case, I said. The Caldwell Industries files made for depressing reading. 7 years of mismanagement, corruption, and willful ignorance of basic business principles. They'd been surviving on reputation and legacy contracts, but even those were drying up as competitors offered better prices and faster delivery. The employee records were even worse. Nepotism ran rampant. Supervisors who'd never worked the floor, managers who'd been promoted because they were someone's cousin or drinking buddy, safety violations, productivity issues, union grievances that had been ignored for years. And there, in the middle of it all, was a familiar name: Kieran Ridge, assembly line supervisor. I pulled his file with hands that were perfectly steady. According to his employment record, he'd been hired 5 years ago as a basic assembly worker. No special skills, no relevant experience, but he'd been promoted 3 times in rapid succession. His performance reviews were a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak. Kieran shows great potential for leadership roles. Strong interpersonal skills and natural charisma. Would benefit from additional training in conflict resolution and time management. Translation: he was charming, lazy, and caused problems. But he was also tall, white, and confident. Corporate management's favorite combination. His current salary was $73,000 a year, plus benefits, for a job that required no education and minimal skills. Meanwhile, the actual skilled workers, the ones who understood the machinery, who could troubleshoot problems, who showed up on time every day, were making $45,000 if they were lucky. The deeper I dug, the angrier I got. Kieran had been written up 16 times in 5 years. Tardiness, extended breaks, arguments with co-workers, failure to follow safety protocols. Any other employee would have been fired years ago. But Kieran had a gift for making his problems someone else's fault. I found incident reports where he'd blamed assembly line errors on faulty equipment and unclear instructions. I found complaints from other supervisors about his department's consistently low productivity. I found a sexual harassment complaint from a female employee that had been mysteriously dropped after Kieran's buddy and HR had a private conversation with the woman. This was the man my family had protected. The golden child who could do no wrong. Who'd needed me to clean up his messes because he was too special to face consequences. Well, consequences had finally caught up with him. I spent 3 weeks on site, analyzing every department, every process, every employee. The workers were skilled and dedicated, but they were being held back by incompetent management and antiquated systems. The company could be saved, but it would require surgical precision. My recommendations were stark: eliminate 17 management positions, restructure the assembly lines, implement new quality control measures, and invest in modern equipment. It would cost $2 million upfront, but save $10 million annually. The board approved everything. I was reviewing the final layoff list when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Heard you're in town. Mom would love to see you. I stared at the message for a long time. After 7 years of silence, now he wanted to reconnect. The timing was suspicious. But I didn't know how suspicious until I did some digging. Kieran had been asking around about me. He'd found out about Ridge Solutions, about my success, about the consulting contract with Caldwell. He knew I was in town, and he knew I had influence. He was reaching out because he thought I could save his job. The arrogance was breathtaking. After what he'd done, after the lies he'd spread, after destroying my future for his own convenience, he actually thought I'd help him. He thought blood was thicker than water. That family loyalty would override everything else. That he was about to learn how wrong he was. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I scheduled individual interviews with all the employees on the layoff list. Company policy, they deserved to hear it directly from the consultant who'd made the recommendations. Kieran was scheduled for the PM on a Friday. I made sure to schedule him last, after everyone else had gone home. I wanted privacy for our conversation. I waited in the conference room, reviewing his file one more time. The sexual harassment complaint that had been buried, the safety violations that had been ignored, the consistent underperformance that had been excused, the promotion he'd received 6 months ago. Despite a review that should have gotten him fired. At the 15, there was a knock on the door. Come in. The door opened, and there was my brother. He looked older, sapped around the middle, with the kind of entitled smugness that came from years of getting away with everything. He walked in with a confident smile, the same one he'd worn, while showing me the ashes of my Princeton letter. Well, he said, settling into the chair across from me. Look who came crawling back home. I didn't respond. I just watched him, noting the expensive watch, the designer shirt, the casual arrogance that radiated from every pore. He continued. When I heard Ridge Solutions was consulting here, I thought, no way, that's my little brother. But here you are. Made something of yourself after all. Have a seat, Mr. Ridge. His smile faltered slightly at the formal tone. Mr. Ridge, come on, Riven, it's me. I know exactly who you are. Please, sit down. He sat, and I opened his file. I'm here to discuss your employment status with Caldwell Industries. My employment status. He laughed. I'm not going anywhere. I'm a supervisor. I've got seniority, and I know where all the bodies are buried around here. Actually, you're being terminated, effective immediately. The smile died completely. What? Your position is being eliminated as part of the corporate restructuring. You'll receive the week's severance pay, and your benefits will continue through the end of the month. You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "This is about the college thing, isn't it?" "Jesus. Riven, that was 7 years ago. You need to let that go. This has nothing to do with college. This is about your performance record." I slid the file across the table. 16 disciplinary actions, consistent underperformance. A sexual harassment complaint that was mysteriously dropped. You've been a liability to this company for years. That's bullshit, and you know it. I'm good at my job, are you? Your department has the lowest productivity rating in the company. Your safety record is abysmal. 3 of your best workers have requested transfers to other departments, specifically to get away from you. Those are lies. They're documented facts. Would you like me to call on some of your coworkers to confirm?" He was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then that familiar calculating look crossed his face, the one I remembered from childhood, when he was figuring out how to turn a situation to his advantage. "Look," he said, leaning forward with fake sincerity, "I know we've had our differences, but we're family. Families stick together, right? You help me out here, and I'll make sure everyone knows you're not the unstable kid who ran away. I'll tell them the truth about how smart you are, how successful you've become. The truth, yeah. I'll fix the story. Tell people you were just ahead of your time. Too ambitious for this small town." I stared at him, amazed. After everything, he still thought he held the cards. He still thought he could manipulate me with threats and promises. "That's very generous." I said carefully, "I'm a generous guy, always have been. So, what do you say? Help your big brother out." I closed the file and looked him directly in the eyes. "I say you're fired." The silence that followed was beautiful. I watched Kieran's face cycle through disbelief, anger, and finally, something I'd never seen before, genuine fear. For the first time in his life, he was facing consequences he couldn't charm his way out of. "You can't do this," he said, but his voice had lost its swagger. "I'll sue. I'll tell everyone you're using your position to settle personal scores. Go ahead." I leaned back in my chair, completely calm. "I've documented everything. Every recommendation I made was based on performance metrics, financial impact, and operational efficiency. Your termination is justified by 7 years of poor performance and violation of company policies. This is revenge, pure and simple." "No," I said. "Revenge would be personal. This is just business." He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You know what? I'm glad I burned that letter. Look what college did to you, turned you into some cold-hearted corporate asshole. At least I'm still human, are you? Because I remember you telling me that destroying my future was justified, because you needed someone to clean up your messes. How human was that? That was different. We were kids. You were 23, I was 17, and you made a choice to hurt me because it was convenient for you." He was quiet for a moment, and I thought I saw something like regret flicker across his face, but then he shook his head. "I was trying to keep the family together. You were trying to keep your personal cleanup crew together. We needed you, Riven. Mom was falling apart. I was struggling. You were struggling because you never learned to handle your own problems. And Mom was falling apart because she spent all her energy enabling you instead of taking care of herself. That's not fair." "Fair." I laughed, and it came out bitter. "You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been letting me go to Princeton. Fair would have been supporting my dreams instead of sabotaging them. Fair would have been taking responsibility for your own life instead of making me responsible for it. I made mistakes," he said quietly. "But I was young and scared, and you chose to deal with that by destroying someone else's future, someone who never did anything but try to help you." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot where workers were heading home for the weekend. Good people, most of them, people who showed up, did their jobs, and went home to families who appreciated them. "You want to know what's funny?" I said without turning around. "For years, I wondered if you were right, if I was selfish for wanting to leave, if I was abandoning my family when they needed me most. Maybe you were. No, I was saving myself, and that's not selfish, that's necessary." I turned back to face him. "You know what I learned in those 7 years? Real family doesn't sabotage your dreams to make themselves feel better. Real family celebrates your success instead of resenting it." "So what now?" he asked. "You've got your revenge. You've destroyed my life. Are you happy?" "I haven't destroyed your life, Kieran. I've just stopped subsidizing it." Same thing. No, it's not. You're 45 years old. You have skills, experience, and connections. You can find another job, build a career, maybe even learn to take responsibility for your own choices, but you'll have to do it without using me as a safety net. He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head. I don't even know who you are anymore. I'm who I always was. You just never bothered to look. After he left, I sat in the empty conference room for a long time, outside. The sun was setting over the town where I'd grown up, where I'd learned that love could be conditional and family could be a trap, where I discovered that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to walk away from everything you've ever known. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Kieran told me what happened. How could you do this to your own brother? I stared at the message, feeling nothing but tired resignation. Even now, even after everything, I was still the villain in their story, the ungrateful son who'd forgotten where he came from. I typed back. I gave him the same chance I gave everyone else. His performance spoke for itself. He's family, so was I. She didn't respond to that. 3 months later, I got a call from Marcus. He was in town visiting his daughter and wanted to have dinner. We met at a restaurant I'd never been to as a kid, the kind of place where entrees cost more than my family used to spend on groceries in a week. You look different, he said after we'd ordered. Different how? Lighter, like you've been carrying something heavy and finally put it down. I told him about Kieran, about the confrontation, about the choice I'd made. He listened without judgment, the way he'd always listened when I was struggling to figure out the right path. Do you regret it? He asked. No, I thought I would, but I don't. Good. You know what your problem always was. You thought you owed them something just because you share DNA. But the only thing you owe anyone is honesty and fairness. You gave your brother both. My family doesn't see it that way. Your family sees what they want to see. They always have. He was right. I'd spent years hoping they'd understand, hoping they'd see the person I'd become instead of the role they'd assigned me. But understanding required a level of self-awareness they'd never been willing to develop. What now? Marcus asked. Now I figure out what I actually want instead of what I'm supposed to want. And what do you want? I thought about it. I want to build something meaningful, not just profitable, meaningful. I want to work with people who value competence over convenience. I want to wake up in the morning and not dread checking my phone. Sounds like a good plan. It is. 6 months later, I expanded Ridge Solutions into a full-service business consulting firm. We specialized in helping family-owned businesses transition to professional management companies, where nepotism and dysfunction were holding back growth. It was satisfying work, helping people break cycles that had been generations in the making. I also started a scholarship fund for kids from dysfunctional families, kids who needed help getting to college, who didn't have parents who could co-sign loans or provide emotional support. I called it the Fresh Start Foundation, and I funded it entirely from my own profits. Every year, I get letters from recipients, kids who are the first in their families to graduate college, who've gone on to medical school or law school or engineering programs, kids who understand that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is save yourself. I keep those letters in a folder on my desk. They remind me that breaking free doesn't make you selfish, it makes you an example. That success isn't about proving anything to the people who held you back. It's about becoming the person you were always meant to be. Last week, I got a wedding invitation. My name was written in elegant script on expensive paper, ribbon, ridge, and guest. The return address was Mom's house. I stared at it for a long time, then put it in the recycling bin. Some doors, once closed, should stay that way, but I did send a gift. A check for $5,000 and a note. Congratulations on your new beginning. I hope you find the happiness you deserve. I signed it simply, R. Ridge. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't about making them pay for what they took from you. Sometimes it's about building something so much better than what they offered that their absence becomes a gift. I learned that the hard way, but I learned it completely. And that, I think, is worth more than any acceptance letter could ever be. Hold you back. Real family doesn't I worked 2 jobs, aced every test, and earned a full scholarship. The letter came Princeton, but it vanished. My brother laughed and showed me the ashes. If you leave, I've got no one to clean up my messes. That night, I left anyway with nothing. He told everyone I ran away in shame. 7 years later, I bought the company that just laid him off. Tomorrow, he interviews with me. Let's see how he explains teamwork now.